The chamber of the Galactic Senate shone like a sun of glass and crystal, with walls that sparkled in colors not found in nature. Thousands of alien leaders filled the seats, their bodies tall, short, winged, scaled, and strange, each one carrying the pride of their species. The voices of the galaxy rose together in a storm of noise, every tongue filled with the same subject. Humanity. The humans sat in their place at the edge of the chamber, their dark uniforms simple compared to the glittering robes and armor of the other delegates. Their faces were calm, their eyes steady, but the air around them was heavy. Everyone in the chamber knew what was coming. The Speaker of the Senate, a towering being with silver skin and a voice like thunder, raised his hand, calling for order. The noise died away, but the mood grew sharper, for this was the day the vote would be called. Humanity has been judged, the Speaker announced, his voice echoing across the crystal walls. They are reckless, they are violent, and they endanger the balance of peace. Today, this Senate decides their fate. His words sent a ripple of excitement through the chamber. Many alien leaders nodded, their eyes filled with disdain as they looked toward the humans. A reptilian general hissed, his scales flashing with satisfaction. Humans have always hidden behind weapons, he spat. Strip them, and they will be nothing. An insectoid queen clicked her mandibles in agreement, her high voice sharp. They are dangerous children who play with fire. Take away their tools of war, and they will finally learn obedience. Laughter followed, filling the chamber with scorn. The humans did not speak. They sat still, their faces unreadable, their silence louder than the jeers of the council. Some aliens grew bolder, pointing fingers and listing every human war, every battle, every scar on history. They cannot be trusted, shouted a lord covered in feathers of gold. Everywhere they go, they bring chaos. Others nodded, reminding the chamber of human colonies that had risen fast, too fast, often with weapons at their side. Each insult was met with cheers, each accusation with mocking applause. Yet still, the humans did not move. They watched, their eyes cold, their lips sealed. The vote began. One by one, empires declared their choice. Yes, disarm them. Yes, strip them. Yes, take their weapons. The words struck like hammers, each one falling heavier than the last. It was not just a vote, it was humiliation, a public declaration that humanity was weak, dangerous, and unworthy of trust. As the list of yes votes grew longer, the chamber shook with cheers. Alien leaders shouted in triumph, proud that they had humbled a species they never understood. Some laughed openly, others clapped their hands against the table, while a few sneered directly at the silent humans. When the final vote was cast, the speaker raised his voice again, the sound rolling across the chamber like thunder. The Senate has decided. Humanity shall surrender its weapons. From this day forth, they are forbidden to build fleets, forbidden to carry arms of war, forbidden to walk among us as equals until they are disarmed. The chamber exploded in applause. Thousands of voices cheered, banners waved, claws and hands pounded against crystal tables. It was a celebration of arrogance, a declaration of victory before the humans had even spoken. The aliens believed they had broken them, that humanity would bow, that they had crushed their pride with a single vote. But in the midst of that storm, the humans remained still. Their silence was sharp, like a blade hidden in plain sight. The envoys exchanged glances, their expressions calm but their eyes burning with something unspoken. They did not argue. They did not plead. They did not even frown. They sat as if the decision meant nothing at all. The more the chamber cheered, the colder their silence became. Some aliens began to shift uneasily in their seats, sensing something they could not explain. The laughter of victory felt thinner, weaker, as if it could not cover the weight pressing in from that quiet corner of the room. The speaker, blind to the tension, lifted his hand in triumph. "It is done," he declared, his voice shaking the walls. "Humanity is disarmed. Humanity is broken." But the words hung heavy in the chamber, too heavy, as if the air itself rejected them. For the first time, a whisper of doubt touched the hearts of those who had mocked. The human silence was not the silence of defeat. It was the silence of patience, of something waiting, something that had yet to be revealed. When the session ended, the alien leaders rose in laughter and pride, congratulating one another, convinced they had secured the galaxy's future. They did not see the humans rise slowly to their feet. They did not notice the way their footsteps echoed across the chamber floor. They did not understand the cold stillness in their eyes as they turned and walked toward the exit. No one dared to stop them. No one dared to speak. And as the doors closed behind them, a quiet fear began to creep into the minds of those who had cheered the loudest. For deep down, beneath the arrogance and pride, one thought refused to fade. What would humanity's answer be? The chamber of the Galactic Senate still rang with the sound of victory long after the vote had been declared. Alien voices echoed off the crystal walls, proud and loud, their laughter sharp and cruel. Many of them had waited for this moment for years, the day when humanity would finally be humbled, their weapons stripped away, their pride broken. Delegates shook hands, claws, and tendrils, congratulating one another as if they had just won a war without lifting a single blade. Yet, in the corner where the human envoys had sat, there was only silence. Their chairs stood empty now, their dark presence gone, and though the hall was filled with noise, that silence felt louder than everything else. The moment still replayed in the minds of those who had watched it happen. The humans had not argued, had not shouted, had not even raised a single word in protest. When the vote was finished and the declaration made, they had simply stood together, their movements precise, unified, and heavy with meaning. Without a glance at the jeering crowd. They had turned their backs on the Senate. Their boots struck the polished floor with a sound that carried far into the hall, sharp and steady, each step echoing like thunder. No one had dared to block their path. No one had even spoken. For a few brief seconds, every voice had fallen quiet, every eye fixed on their departing figures as the great doors closed behind them. Then the laughter had returned, loud and mocking, as if trying to drown the unease left behind. Now, as the chamber began to empty, that unease lingered. A few of the younger delegates still laughed, still jeered, repeating jokes about how the weapons of children would soon be taken from them. But the older ones, those who had seen wars, shifted uneasily in their seats. They knew silence when they saw it. Silence could mean weakness, yes, but it could also mean something else, calculation. And the silence of the humans had not been the silence of defeat. It had been the silence of those who chose not to speak because they did not need to. In the private halls outside the chamber, whispers began almost immediately. Why didn't they fight back? Asked one alien commander, his scales twitching nervously. Why didn't they shout? Another shook her head. Because they don't need to. That is what frightens me. The words spread quickly, and though no one admitted it openly, a sense of dread began to grow. The humans had accepted nothing. They had simply left. Back on their homeworlds, alien citizens celebrated the Senate's decision. But even there the unease took root. News broadcasts replayed the moment the humans stood and left, their faces calm, their eyes unreadable. Commentators called it an act of defiance, others claimed it was cowardice, but the images were always the same. Humans walking out, silent, while the galaxy cheered their supposed defeat. The more the image replayed, the less victorious it felt. Something about it unsettled everyone who watched. In the following days, the Senate tried to return to business, but every session seemed colder, emptier. The absence of humans was a shadow in the chamber. When new laws were debated, some leaders caught themselves glancing toward the empty chairs, half expecting a human voice to cut through the noise. But no voice came. The seats remained dark and unyielding, and with every passing day, the silence grew heavier. The Senate pretended it was strength, but deep down, many of them knew it was weakness. They had not broken humanity. They had simply cast them out, and now no one knew what they would do. The elder, the same who had whispered during the vote, sat in his corner, watching the others with tired eyes. His voice, though weak, carried an edge of warning when he finally spoke. "You cheer too loudly," he said to the others. "Do you not see what has happened? No one has ever walked out of this chamber before. No species has ever dared. And yet the humans did, without a word. They should not have left. You do not know what comes next. His words silenced the laughter for a moment, but the delegates quickly dismissed him, waving him off as paranoid, as a relic of the past. Still, the unease clung to them like a shadow. Meanwhile, rumors began to spread among the outer colonies. Traders claimed that human ships were moving differently now, more organized, more deliberate. Patrols along the border regions reported that human convoys had stopped communicating with outsiders, choosing instead to move in silence. Factories on Earth and its colonies worked day and night, their production unbroken. The Senate dismissed these stories as lies, but deep down, they remembered the silence in the chamber, and each new rumor only fed the quiet dread in their hearts. What struck the galaxy most was how calm the humans had been. They had not stormed out in anger, they had not shouted threats, they had not begged for forgiveness. They had simply walked away, as if the Senate's decree was meaningless. That image stayed in the minds of every leader who had been present. In their arrogance, they tried to laugh it off, but when the laughter faded, the fear remained. The silence of the humans was like a storm on the horizon, distant, unseen, but impossible to ignore. By the end of the week, the chamber was quieter than it had ever been. Delegates still debated, still shouted, but none of it carried the same strength. The memory of boots striking the floor, of humans walking out without hesitation, haunted every meeting. No one spoke of it aloud, but every leader wondered the same thing. If humanity had not accepted the Senate's command, then what were they planning? What would their answer be? And so the Senate, for all its pride and power, found itself waiting. Waiting in fear, waiting in doubt, waiting for the silence to break. The arrogance of their vote still echoed, but the echo grew weaker each day, drowned out by the sound of footsteps no one could forget. Humanity had left the chamber in silence, but their silence was not the end. It was only the beginning, and the galaxy felt it in its bones. The whispers began slowly, like faint ripples on a still pond, but soon they spread across the galaxy with the speed of fire in dry grass. Traders were the first to notice. Merchant vessels that had once passed freely through human-controlled space now reported closed channels and blocked lanes. Beacons that normally shone brightly along the borders had gone dark. Human patrols, once chatty and open with other crews, no longer responded to hails. Instead, they drifted silently at the edges of trade routes, their ships moving with purpose but without explanation. Captains who saw them swore that something had changed in their posture. They were no longer protecting trade. They were guarding something. In the Senate chamber, the absence of humanity grew heavier with each session. Delegates filled the air with endless speeches, but more and more their words circled back to the same subject, the humans. What were they doing? Why had they not protested the vote? Why had they left so quietly? At first, most of the Senate tried to laugh it off. They sulk in their worlds, one avian senator cackled. Let them brood. Their spirit is broken. But even as he said it, his wings trembled slightly, betraying unease. Others nodded too quickly, their forced laughter filling the crystal hall, but no one could shake the memory of the humans' cold eyes as they had walked away. Then the first strange reports arrived. A neutral colony near human space sent a desperate message: their factories never sleep. Day and night, smoke rises into the sky. We do not know what they are building. The message cut off abruptly, and no further communication was received. Soon after, a group of merchant vessels traveling near Earth's outer colonies claimed to have seen fleets of human ships moving in tight formation. They were not on patrol, one frightened captain said. They were preparing for something. And when they saw us, they did not speak. They simply watched, and it felt like being judged. The Senate tried to bury these reports, calling them exaggerations or lies spread by smugglers. But more arrived, each one harder to deny. A mining company on the edge of human space went silent, its workers vanishing without a trace. Scout ships sent to investigate failed to return. Independent traders spoke of shadowy shapes in the void, massive constructs being assembled in secret. Some claimed they had seen structures orbiting barren moons, vast frames glowing faintly under the light of distant suns. None of the evidence was confirmed, but the rumors themselves were enough to shake confidence. Outside the chambers of power, ordinary beings began to whisper as well. In the markets of frontier worlds, in the dark corners of starports, in the taverns where mercenaries gathered, the same word spread: the humans are preparing. The phrase grew into something larger, a warning repeated so often that it became impossible to ignore. Mothers told their children that the humans were sharpening their blades in silence. Soldiers muttered that Earth was building fleets no one could match. Even priests in distant temples began to weave the story into their sermons, warning that arrogance had angered the most dangerous species in the stars. Inside the Senate, the division widened. Some leaders demanded immediate action. "We must enforce the vote," cried a tall insectoid, her many arms trembling with fury. "If they defy us, we must send fleets to disarm them by force." Others shook their heads, their eyes heavy with fear. "You do not understand what you ask," whispered a reptilian general with scarred scales. "I have fought alongside humans. I have seen them hold ground against armies 10 times their size. If they prepare in silence, then we should pray they prepare for peace, not war." His words fell like cold water across the chamber, leaving many unable to respond. Still, arrogance clung stubbornly to some. "They are bluffing," sneered a feathered lord, his crest rising high. "They cannot resist the power of the Senate. They will bow, sooner or later." But even he avoided looking at the empty human seat when he spoke, for deep down he felt the same dread as the others. The silence of humanity had become unbearable, like a drumbeat no one could hear but everyone could feel. On the borders, the tension grew worse. Ships from smaller empires that once traded freely with Earth now reported being turned away, their cargo seized or redirected. Colonies that had once welcomed alien visitors shut their doors, their skies filled with human patrols. Messages sent to Earth went unanswered. The humans had not declared war, had not spoken a single word, yet their silence had more power than fleets of battleships. Entire regions of space felt colder, darker, as if a storm was gathering just beyond sight. The elder counselor, who had been dismissed so many times before, spoke again during one heated session. His body was frail, his voice soft, but when he spoke, the chamber fell silent. "You think they are broken," he said, "but you do not understand the humans. They do not shout when they prepare. They do not roar when they sharpen their blades. They wait. And when they strike, it is not with words, it is with fire." His warning sent a chill through the room, but again, the arrogant brushed it aside. "Old fear," one sneered. "Nothing more." Yet no one could fully dismiss the weight in his words. By the end of the month, the rumors had grown too large to ignore. Entire systems near human space reported strange silence. Communication relays flickered and died. Merchants refused to travel those routes, leaving entire sectors isolated. And in the hearts of every senator, every soldier, every citizen, the same thought whispered louder and louder. If humanity had not surrendered their weapons, then what had they done with them? The rumors became prophecy, and the prophecy became fear. The galaxy did not yet know the truth, but it felt it all the same. Humanity had walked away from the Senate in silence, but their silence was not weakness. It was the silence of a storm waiting to break. The first systems to go dark were small, insignificant by the measure of the Galactic Senate, the kind of frontier outposts that few cared to remember. But their silence did not go unnoticed. A mining colony on the edge of human space stopped sending its shipments. At first, the guilds complained, then worried, then grew silent when no response came at all. A relay station that had once carried signals between 3-star systems simply vanished from the networks, its last transmission a burst of static that no engineer could explain. The Senate tried to dismiss these losses as technical failures, accidents of distance, but soon there were too many to ignore. Trade convoys that ventured near human space returned shaken, their captains pale, their voices trembling. They told stories of ships appearing from the void without warning, silent and enormous, shadowing them as they crossed the border. They did not fire, one captain insisted, her eyes wide with fear. They did not speak. They only followed us. When they finally left, it felt like we had been judged. Another merchant reported entire star lanes empty of traffic, stations abandoned, colonies dark. It is as if the humans pulled them all into their shadow, he whispered, and no one laughed. In the Senate chamber, fear began to take root, though pride still kept many from admitting it. Heated arguments broke out. One insectoid general slammed her claws against the crystal table, demanding fleets be sent immediately to enforce the vote and occupy human space. "We gave them an order," she shrieked, her voice clicking with rage. "If they will not obey, then we must break them before they grow bolder." A reptilian warlord with scarred scales growled in reply, his voice heavy with memory. "You are fools if you think they will break so easily. I have seen them fight. They do not stop when others surrender. They do not yield when surrounded. If they are silent now, it is because they are preparing. Do you really want to wake what they are building in the dark?" His words left the chamber silent for a moment, the weight of his warning sinking in, before arrogant voices rose again, calling him a coward. But outside the chamber, whispers spread faster than decrees. On frontier worlds, civilians began to flee. Families abandoned their homes, loading ships with whatever they could carry, unwilling to risk living so close to human borders. Pirates who once preyed on human trade routes vanished, their ships destroyed or simply never returning. Smugglers told stories of shadow fleets drifting through the void, ships larger than anything ever seen before, their dark hulls swallowing starlight. No one could prove these stories, but no one dared deny them either. Fear was spreading, and fear had a power of its own. The elder counselor, his body frail but his eyes sharp, spoke again during a session filled with shouting. His voice was low, but the chamber fell quiet when he rose. "You think they are defeated," he said, "because you told them to surrender their weapons. But weapons were never their strength. Their strength is their will, and their will has not been broken. You do not see it yet, but the silence of their systems is not emptiness. It is focus. They are preparing for something greater than you can imagine." His words sent a chill through the chamber, but again they were brushed aside, though with less certainty than before. As more systems vanished from communication, the panic grew. The council sent scout ships to investigate, but none returned. Weeks passed, and the reports grew stranger. Ships patrolling near human borders picked up faint signals, pulses of energy so vast they shook their senses, as if entire suns were being harnessed. Other fleets swore they had seen lights in the void, immense structures rising above barren moons, glowing faintly like the bones of gods. These reports were dismissed in public, but behind closed doors the senators whispered, their voices trembling. Something was happening in human space, something that defied imagination. Soon, even the strongest empires began to falter. Some leaders demanded to reopen contact with Earth, to send envoys with apologies before it was too late. Others shouted that humans must be confronted, that showing weakness would only make them stronger. But none could deny the truth staring them in the face. The Senate had passed its decree, and the humans had simply walked away. Now, systems were going dark, scouts were vanishing, and rumors of fleets beyond measure spread across the stars. Whatever the humans were doing, they were not surrendering. In taverns and marketplaces, in the shadows of starports and the whispers of smugglers, one phrase began to spread like prophecy. The systems vanish because the humans are claiming them. It was said with fear, but also with awe. No one knew if it was true, but the idea alone was enough to weaken the Senate's authority. If humanity could silence whole regions of space without firing a shot, what could they do if they chose to reveal their full power? By the end of the season, the truth was undeniable. The vanishing systems were no accident. They were a message. Humanity had not obeyed the Senate's order. They had not surrendered their weapons. Instead, they had turned inward, closing their borders, building in silence, and now the stars themselves were beginning to answer. The galaxy held its breath, waiting for the silence to break, and in every chamber, every home, every heart, the same fear grew louder. The Senate had tried to strip humanity of its power, and in doing so, they had unleashed something far greater. The first reveal came not with war, not with thunder, but with shadows in the void. It began with a convoy of merchant ships traveling through the borderlands near human space. 50 vessels, heavy with goods and guarded by escort craft, entered a star system that had always been considered safe. They expected the usual checkpoints, the normal chatter of human patrols, but instead they found silence. The comms were dead. The beacons were gone. Even the stars seemed dimmer than usual, as if something vast and unseen was waiting beyond sight. At first, the convoy pressed on, nervous but determined, until the lead ship's sensors caught movement. The reports that followed shook the galaxy to its core. A shadow appeared against the stars, a shape so massive it blocked entire constellations from view. At first the captains thought it was a planet out of orbit, some celestial body drifting where it did not belong. But then the shadow moved. Engines glowed faintly at its back, not like the bright drives of council ships but like the breathing of some great beast, slow and steady, endless. The convoy panicked, scattering in every direction, but no weapons fired from the great shape. It did not speak, it did not broadcast, it simply drifted past them, a silent giant that dwarfed everything they had ever known. The convoy returned in pieces, half of its ships lost in the chaos of escape. Those who survived spoke with trembling voices. They described a human ship larger than any ever recorded, a vessel so vast that even the Senate's greatest flagships would look like insects beside it. Its black hull swallowed starlight, its lines sharp and alien in design, yet unmistakably human in intent. It was not a warship built for intimidation. It was built for dominance. And the most terrifying detail was its silence. It had not engaged them, had not even acknowledged them. It had let them see it, as if revealing itself on purpose, a warning sent without words. When the story reached the Senate, chaos erupted. Some called the survivors liars, accusing them of spreading fear. But when fragments of sensor data were presented, the chamber fell into stunned silence. The readings showed a vessel with power levels so vast the instruments barely captured them. If such ships existed, then humanity had not only refused to surrender its weapons, they had built something far beyond the reach of any other empire. The vote to disarm humanity now looked like a cruel joke. Across the galaxy, fear became hysteria. On frontier worlds, people whispered of black giants moving through the void, watching from the edges of systems before vanishing into hyperspace. Soldiers stationed near human space refused to patrol, their commanders unable to force them into what they now believed was suicide. Smaller civilizations began to reconsider their alliances, quietly sending envoys to Earth, hoping to earn favor before the storm broke. And through it all, humanity said nothing. Their silence was worse than any threat, their absence heavier than any fleet. The elder counselor spoke again, his voice soft but cutting through the storm of fear. "You see now," he said, his tired eyes scanning the chamber. "You laughed when they walked away. You mocked their silence. But silence was their shield, and in it they built the weapons you feared most. You wanted them disarmed. Instead, you forced them to become something greater. You thought you had humbled them, but all you did was give them reason to rise." His words echoed in the chamber long after he sat down. No one dared to argue with him now. The proof was already spreading across the stars. Soon, more convoys reported sightings. Sometimes it was a single massive vessel drifting in the dark, sometimes entire formations of colossal ships moving together in eerie silence. They never attacked, never fired, but their presence alone shattered morale. Council fleets sent to investigate turned back without engaging, their admirals unwilling to risk confrontation. Soldiers who once mocked humans now whispered their name with dread. If they built ships like that in secret, they asked, what else have they built? The Senate tried desperately to maintain control. Speeches were made, promises shouted, but no decree could erase the fear. The people no longer believed in the Senate's power. They believed in the shadows drifting beyond the stars. And every time a new story emerged, that belief grew stronger. Humanity was no longer a weak race to be disarmed. They had become something untouchable, a force that made even the galaxy's most powerful empires tremble. The true terror was not in the size of the ships, but in the intent behind them. Humanity had not built them to show off, not to boast, not to parade through the council's skies. They had built them in silence, in secrecy, and revealed them only when they chose. That level of discipline, that level of control, was something the other empires could not comprehend. It was the silence of predators who knew their strength and no longer needed to prove it. The day the first shadow was revealed became legend almost immediately. The merchants who survived were questioned endlessly, their words dissected and replayed across 1,000 worlds. But the truth was undeniable. Humanity had risen beyond imagination. The Senate's command to disarm had not weakened them. It had driven them to build fleets so vast that the stars themselves seemed to tremble. And though they had not fired a single shot, the galaxy already knew it was living in a new era, an era where humanity no longer asked for a seat at the table, because they had built a throne in the stars. The stars trembled not because of explosions, but because of what drifted silently between them. By the time the first human fleets revealed themselves in force, the galaxy was already whispering in fear. Yet nothing could prepare the Senate or its people for the sight of hundreds of colossal warships emerging together from the dark. They appeared without warning, cutting across council space like shadows with edges sharper than steel. Their hulls were vast, their engines pulsing with restrained power, their formation so precise it looked less like a fleet and more like a wall of judgment moving across the void. For those who saw them up close, it was not war. It was the feeling of standing before something unstoppable. On one frontier world, soldiers stationed in orbit were the first to witness it. Their scanners lit up with signals, the screens overflowing with readings that made no sense. At first, they thought it was a sensor malfunction. No system could register so many massive objects at once. Then, out of the endless black, the shapes appeared. Dozens, then hundreds, each one larger than the stations built to monitor the skies. Engines glowed faintly at their backs, not loud or bright but steady, pulsing like the heartbeat of a giant. They moved slowly, calmly, not in attack but in quiet presence. The soldiers froze, hands trembling over their weapons. Alarms screamed, defense systems powered up, but no one gave the order to fire. They all knew it would mean nothing. The human ships did not speak. They did not broadcast demands or threats. They only drifted past, silent and overwhelming, and as they passed, every star in the system seemed to flicker. Some swore it was a trick of the sensors, others claimed it was fear clouding their eyes, but the feeling was the same. The stars themselves trembled at the weight of those fleets. When the human armada finally vanished into hyperspace, the soldiers collapsed in relief, their armor soaked with sweat. Reports were filed, but most of them were nothing more than fragments of panicked voices repeating the same phrase over and over. "We are not ready. We are not ready." News of the encounter spread like wildfire. Worlds far from human space began to panic. Trade routes collapsed overnight as merchants refused to travel anywhere near the sectors where human fleets had been seen. Entire populations demanded their governments cut ties with the Senate and seek peace with Earth before it was too late. The Council tried to silence these fears with speeches, declaring that the humans were bluffing, that their fleets were just empty shells meant to intimidate. But no one believed them anymore. The images, the sensor logs, and the terrified words of soldiers and merchants carried more weight than any decree. Inside the Senate chamber, the arrogance that once filled the hall was gone. Delegates shouted in desperation instead of pride. Some screamed for war, demanding that the Council unite its fleets and strike before humanity grew even stronger. Others begged for diplomacy, for apologies, for a desperate attempt to mend what had been broken. But no matter the voice, all carried the same fear. The humans had been underestimated, and now the galaxy stood on the edge of a truth it could no longer deny. The elder counselor, frail but unwavering, spoke once again. His voice was calm, cutting through the chaos like a blade. "You see now what silence builds," he said. "You believed your vote had power. You thought a declaration in this chamber could strip them of their strength. But their strength was never here. It was never in this council. It was always in themselves. And while you mocked, they prepared. Now the stars themselves bow under their weight." His words left the chamber quiet, though none would admit he was right. Yet in their hearts, every leader knew it. The sightings grew more frequent. Fleets of black giants appeared at the edges of council space, always drifting silently, never attacking. They did not need to. Their very presence was war without fire. Entire garrisons abandoned their posts when human ships appeared, fleeing before a single shot was fired. Some planets even surrendered without being asked, raising human banners not out of conquest but out of fear and respect. For the first time in history, the Senate realized it no longer controlled the galaxy. Its power had cracked the moment humanity turned its back, and now those cracks spread wider with each passing day. In taverns, markets, and stations, the stories grew larger than truth, but even the wildest tales carried weight. "I saw a ship as big as a moon," one miner whispered. "It blocked out the stars when it passed." "They built fleets in secret, bigger than the Council's entire armada," another said. "And they built them while we laughed at them." The fear was no longer contained to the rulers. It had consumed the people, and no speech, no order, no law could take it away. The Senate had tried to disarm humanity, to strip them of their weapons and pride. Instead, they had forced them into silence, and in that silence, humanity had built something beyond imagination. The galaxy now trembled not because of war, but because of the shadow of what was to come. Humanity had not yet spoken. Humanity had not yet acted. But the sight of their fleets had made one thing clear: the day they chose to break their silence would be the day the galaxy itself would change forever. The message came when the galaxy least expected it. For weeks, the massive human fleets had drifted in silence, haunting the edges of council space like ghosts too vast to comprehend. They had not fired a single shot, yet their presence had shattered trade, broken armies, and silenced even the proudest rulers. Fear had become the daily language of the stars. Every being wondered the same thing: when would the silence end? The answer arrived without warning. One by one, across 1,000 worlds, every screen, every projector, every relay flickered to life. Static filled the air, and then an image appeared. A single human stood at the center of the transmission. His uniform was simple, black with the symbol of Earth on his chest. His face was calm, his eyes steady, and his voice, when it came, rolled across the stars with a weight that felt heavier than entire fleets. "We asked for respect," he said. His tone carried no anger, no hatred, only certainty. "We asked for peace. You gave us mockery. We asked for unity. You gave us scorn. We asked to stand as equals. You voted to take away our weapons. Now we do not ask. We choose." In the council chamber, the transmission played on walls of crystal, and the alien rulers sat frozen, unable to speak. The same chamber that had once roared with laughter at humanity's supposed defeat was now so silent that even breaths felt deafening. The words of the human envoy pressed against them like iron chains. They had expected rage, threats, desperate cries for justice. But instead, the human spoke with calm control, and that calmness was more terrifying than any scream. The broadcast continued. Behind the envoy, the holo shifted, showing the fleets. Thousands of colossal warships stretched across the void, their silhouettes swallowing stars. Engines pulsed like the beating of giants' hearts. Some ships were so large they seemed to rival moons, others bristled with towers and spires that glowed faintly with energy. It was not just a fleet. It was an armada unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen, revealed not in anger but as fact. "You tried to strip us of our strength," the human voice said. "But strength does not come from weapons. Strength comes from will. And ours was never broken. While you laughed, we prepared. While you mocked, we built. And now, you see the truth." Across the galaxy, billions watched in silence. On frontier colonies, workers dropped their tools and stared. On distant stations, soldiers froze at their posts. On rich core worlds, leaders trembled in their palaces. The voice of the human envoy spoke directly to all of them, steady and unyielding. "We will not kneel. We will not surrender. We do not seek conquest, but we will not be stripped of what is ours. The galaxy belongs to all who have the courage to hold it. And we will hold it." The elder counselor in the chamber lowered his head, his ancient eyes filled with sorrow and awe. "It is done," he whispered. They have revealed themselves. And the stars will never be the same. Around him, younger delegates sat pale and silent, their arrogance shattered. Some shook their heads in disbelief, others trembled openly. A few still tried to mutter words of resistance, but even they could not finish their sentences. The image of the fleets loomed too large in their minds. The truth was undeniable. The Senate no longer commanded fear. Humanity did. The human envoy's voice grew sharper as he reached the end. You believed your decree had power. You believed your vote could decide our fate. But your authority ends here. You do not decide what humanity will be. We decide. Remember this day. Remember that when you tried to take away our weapons, you awakened something beyond your imagination. You will remember it not as the day you disarmed us, but as the day the stars trembled. And with that, the transmission ended. Every screen went dark, every relay fell silent. But the silence that followed was not the same as before. It was not the silence of waiting, it was the silence of realization. The galaxy now knew exactly what humanity was, and the weight of that truth pressed down on every world. In the streets of countless planets, riots broke out. Some demanded their leaders surrender to Earth at once. Others demanded alliances, hoping to stand beside humans rather than against them. Armies fractured as soldiers whispered that they would rather serve humans than die fighting them. Even the most powerful empires felt their foundations shake, for their citizens no longer looked to the Senate for protection. They looked to the fleets in the dark. In the chamber, the senators sat as if turned to stone. None spoke, none dared to. The empty human seats seemed to burn in their vision, no longer a symbol of absence but of dominance. They had tried to strip humanity of power, and in doing so, they had revealed the truth, that the humans had never needed their approval, their votes, or their laws. They had built a strength that no council could take away. And so the message spread, not just through machines but through hearts. Humanity had spoken, not with rage but with certainty. Their silence had broken, and their words carried the weight of a new age. Across the galaxy, beings whispered the same thought. The Senate had tried to disarm humanity, but Earth's response was beyond imagination. The day the Senate fell silent began like any other, with the great crystal chamber filled by the rulers of 1,000 worlds. The walls shimmered with light, the air buzzed with voices, and the banners of proud empires hung tall and arrogant. But beneath the surface, fear had already hollowed the place. The memory of the broadcast haunted every delegate. The calm human voice, the fleets that stretched across the void, the words that carried more weight than all their laws combined. No decree they passed could erase what the galaxy had already seen. Humanity had revealed its strength, and the Senate's authority had cracked beyond repair. As the session opened, the speaker tried to call for order. His silvered body gleamed, his booming voice shook the chamber, but no one truly listened. The room was divided by panic. Some leaders screamed for negotiation, urging the Senate to beg Earth for forgiveness before it was too late. Others shouted for war, their voices desperate, insisting that the council must act or be consumed. But all their arguments rang hollow, drowned by the weight of silence pressing from the empty human seat at the far end of the hall. It stood like a throne untouched, a shadow heavier than any voice in the chamber. Every time their eyes drifted toward it, their words faltered. Outside the chamber, the galaxy had already changed. Entire trade guilds collapsed as ships refused to travel routes near human fleets. Colonies rebelled against their rulers, demanding alliances with Earth. Soldiers muttered in barracks, refusing to fight if ordered against humans. On some worlds, entire armies switched banners overnight, not through conquest but through choice. They no longer believed in the Senate. They believed in the power that had been revealed in the stars. And while the chamber filled with arguments, those cracks in the galaxy spread wider with every passing hour. The elder counselor, who had spoken warnings since the beginning, sat quietly through the chaos. His frail body trembled, but his eyes held steady. When the shouting reached its peak, he rose slowly, and though his voice was soft, it silenced the chamber more completely than the speaker's booming calls for order. "You do not understand," he said, his words trembling with truth. "It is already over. You thought the vote would strip them of their power, but instead it stripped you of yours. Humanity no longer needs this council. It is we who are at their mercy now. His words fell like stone into water, sending ripples of dread through every heart. None dared to answer, because deep inside they knew he spoke nothing but truth. At that moment, the chamber doors swung open. Delegates turned in shock, expecting guards, but instead they were met with silence. No humans entered, no fleets appeared, only the echo of footsteps from messengers bringing reports. They carried news of more worlds falling quiet, of more fleets appearing in the dark, of more empires breaking away to seek Earth's shadow. The word struck harder than any weapon. The Senate no longer ruled the galaxy. It ruled only itself, and even that power was slipping away. The speaker tried again to rally them. "We are still the heart of the galaxy," he cried, his voice cracking. "We must not bend to fear." But the words rang hollow. Delegates exchanged weary glances, their eyes heavy with despair. They had seen the images of ships larger than moons. They had heard the calm human voice declare that the era of mockery was over. No speech could erase that truth. No law could undo it. Humanity had spoken, and the galaxy had already listened. In taverns, markets, and streets across 1,000 worlds, beings whispered of a new age. They no longer asked if the Senate still held power. They asked instead what humanity would do next. Would they conquer? Would they rule? Or would they simply wait, letting fear do their work for them? No one knew, but everyone agreed on one thing: the galaxy would no longer move at the Senate's command. It would move at Earth's. And so, for the first time in history, the chamber fell completely silent. No shouts, no laughter, no speeches. Only silence. The kind of silence that comes when an empire realizes it is no longer an empire at all. Delegates stared at the empty human seat, and in it they saw the truth they had tried so hard to deny. That empty chair was not weakness, it was dominance. It was a reminder that humanity had turned its back on the council not because they had been defeated, but because they no longer needed it. From that day forward, the galaxy remembered not the vote, not the speeches, not the cheers of arrogance. It remembered the silence that followed, the fleets that blotted out the stars, and the calm human voice that spoke across the void. History would write it as the day the Senate fell silent, the day the galaxy shifted from the rule of many to the will of one. And every time the stars flickered with the passing of human fleets, the galaxy trembled, knowing it had entered an age where humanity no longer asked for a seat at the table, because they had already built a throne among the stars.